Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for another breakfast chat. And today we are going to discuss one of the most pervasive myths in the lifting world for the past couple of decades. And it's one I shouldn't even have to debunk, because I've debunked this years ago by simply showing meta-analysis that looked at this. And again, when I say years ago, we're talking at least 5 years ago, maybe more, when all this data became available. I think it's been even longer at this point, because these are massive myths. And that's this idea that testosterone or growth hormone that you release as a result of training has any impact on muscle growth. Okay? And what the meta-analysis found is that it doesn't. It has no effect. And if you don't know what a meta-analysis is, that is when you take multiple studies, every study that has been done looking at a topic, and researchers look into the data and figure out where they agree, where they disagree, and why they disagree, and look at the methodologies and the testing and the data involved to figure out where the truth is. Okay, meta-analysis is considered the highest form of scientific evidence. So if a person has a meta-analysis and all you have is one or two studies to counter it, you lose by default. Does that make sense? So you produce a study that is contrary to what a meta-analysis is, but you're trying to argue against a meta-analysis with one study, you automatically lose the debate. That's it. It's not considered enough evidence. And the meta-analysis wins. Right? You lose. So it's been looked at this. And the reason this is, in some ways, has been a good myth. In some ways, it's a good myth. Why? Because people have tried to say, well, all these hormone release, if you do heavy squats or you do legs, it makes your whole body grow. That's a great myth because a lot of guys don't want to train their legs, which again, we get them into leg training. So that's a great thing, but it's a lie, and it becomes a problem when training gets based around it. And again, if you guys hear the bird outside, no, I don't have a pet bird. I don't want to have to answer that in the comments. I don't have a pet bird. It's outside. I think there's a nest on my porch. So let's get over and talk about the testosterone and growth hormone. And what people need to understand is that anyone who's focusing on this instead of focusing on muscle tension and mechanical tension is conning you. They're selling you nonsense. They're selling you BS. Mechanical tension is the number one driver. And that's something I've seen some good experts point out, that you can't get away from the mechanical tension aspect. Okay, and then the others, such as muscle damage, metabolic fatigue, are a little more hypothetical. They're less supported in the data as actual mechanisms of producing muscle growth. But tension on the muscle seems to be the primary driver. Okay, so this is where your focus should be in training. In other words, effective reps. How much volume you're getting with effective reps where appropriate tension is being put. When you get pushed down this other road, it's basically, again, a con. And let's discuss why. Then we'll discuss the one hormone that is correlated with it, because it's something that everyone's afraid of. But as far as the testosterone goes, these are minor fluctuations. Again, people, because they see, and it's made even worse when people say, oh, this guy's on TRT. Well, if that guy's on TRT, he'd have 37 pounds less muscle. Okay, TRT can't produce that muscle growth. Guys who go on TRT gain 3 or 4 pounds of muscle from it. Okay? They don't gain 20. It's not how it works. And this is what, again, the research shows. You're going to gain 3 or 4 pounds of muscle. And keeping in mind, TRT itself will produce way larger consistent amounts of testosterone than any type of training will. Okay? Perspective. So the whole course of your lifetime on TRT, 2, 3, 4 pounds of muscle is what you're going to get out of it if you have low testosterone. These transient fluctuations that don't last 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they're just little minor blips. They don't do anything. And the research says they don't do anything. Okay? And you guys are confusing people who aren't increasing their testosterone 20% for a few hours. When you see a lot of the guys who are using tons of it, they're increasing their testosterone 1,000%, 24 hours a day, 2,000%. Not 10%, not 20%. And for a spike, it's there full time. People confuse this very quickly. They don't seem to understand how much stuff a lot of these bodybuilders use. They seem oblivious to their doses. It's not just, oh, they're taking twice what TRT is. No. You don't get that big doing that. Again, not how it works. Then people will say, well, what about the growth hormone aspect? Growth hormone doesn't cause muscle growth at all. Just because the name, let's go back over to the point, because you name something, doesn't mean that that's what it does. A name doesn't produce magical results. So just because it's called growth hormone doesn't mean that it causes muscle growth, because in studies it doesn't. And what do I mean by in studies? Well, when they've looked at it and they've given people doses that if you want to put into street value, what would it cost you to go buy it? $1,000 a month. $1,000 a month. Most people don't have that type of disposable income. Some people do, but the majority of the population, over half, doesn't have $1,000 laying around every month to spend on growth hormone. How much muscle growth do you think it's been found in clinical trials that amount causes compared to people not taking it? 0. Nothing. People are like, well, why do bodybuilders use it? Number one, it seems to create a synergy with that 1,000% increase in testosterone. It does seem to create a synergy there, number one. Number two, it does seem to blunt that gain. Why does that matter? Because a lot of the guys who are using these big concoctions and these cocktails are eating large calorie surpluses. They're oftentimes injecting insulin and other stuff. It's going to lead to fat growth. Again, fat accumulation. Growth hormone lets them get all this anabolic food, all these other anabolic hormones in that could contribute to body fat gain, and it reduces the body fat gain. Better body composition out of it. Right? That's a big factor. Number 3, the cosmetic effects. Growth hormone can change the way someone looks in a relatively short period of time because of the way it redistributes fluid in the body. It can help give guys who want that fuller, more shrink wrap look, it can help give them that look. Right? It has cosmetic benefits. They're not permanent, but it has cosmetic benefits. So that's why people use it. It doesn't actually cause muscle growth. Again, the studies have found it doesn't. So what's the one hormone as a result of training that seems to be correlated with muscle growth? Because there's no correlation at all in either. The amount of test or growth hormone someone released when the meta-analysis have looked at it had no impact on their muscle growth. There was no relationship when all these studies were looked at. But what was found was that elevated cortisol seemed to be correlated post-workout, at the end of a workout. Elevated cortisol did seem to have a correlation. You'd have a correlation with muscle growth. People might say, why? We don't know if it's cause or effect. We could say, well, the cortisol having a hormonal effect could be causing muscle breakdown, right? Cortisol causes muscle and fat breakdown. People who talk about high cortisol and belly fat, that's nonsense too. Cortisol burns fat, helps break down fat, but it also breaks down muscle tissue. Could be that it's then your body then counter responds the other direction. A better explanation is that really hard work and a lot of mechanical tension creates stress on the body and makes your body produce more cortisol. Probably the better explanation, but we don't know for certain which of those two. So it kind of comes to that interesting point of guys talking about trying to blunt their cortisol. You may be shooting yourself in the foot there. As it seems to be correlated with muscle growth post-workout, right? And we know taking large amounts of antioxidants post-workout blunts training response. If you supplement a bunch of vitamin C right after you train, what happens? Blunts the training response. This is what studies have found. It's a real bad idea. So again, the point is that if you're gearing your training around the idea of releasing these hormones, the data and the accumulated data says you are doing nothing of benefit. And if it makes you go to less effective training trying to do it, you're harming your gains. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.